I'm back and better than ever. I just want to feel like I'm enough, and I want people listening to this to feel enough, and so much more. Let's get a little bit more dangerous this season. Let's get dangerously dainty. I just want to reinvent myself this year. I'm just so over being cookie cutter and pleasing others. I want to please myself. Welcome to Season 2 of Dangerously Dainty, the podcast, where we chat with underestimated people who make bold moves. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second episode of Dangerously Dainty, Season 2. I've been thinking about creativity and dedication. One of the reasons that I love doing this podcast is tapping into this creative part of myself. In other aspects of life, it can be really easy to lose that power of imagination. But I love this podcast because I have full control of what I say, write, or produce, and the creative process behind it. I think that as we grow older, the world and practicality can dim the light to creativity. But we should recognize that the most successful, innovative, and inspiring people were creative individuals who went against the grain for something that they were passionate about. With that said, let's get into today's conversation with our very creative and dedicated guest. I met Liv in Paris in a global fashion studies program with Northeastern University. She's finishing up her studies in graphic design with a minor in photography. While at Northeastern, she interned as a graphic designer for HomeSense and was an editorial and graphic intern for Reckin magazine. Her interest in fashion and graphic design has led her to become the design director for Northeastern's fashion magazine, otherwise known as The Avenue. And most importantly, her Instagram page serves forever iconic and stunning fashion looks. I'm serious, folks, she's like the modern day Audrey Hepburn. Let's welcome Liv. Thank you again for doing this. I'm really excited again to hear your perspective as someone who's been working in graphic design and studying it. And I've always honestly admired all of the things that you post on Instagram and all of the content, and I'm secretly envious.
Oh my gosh, thank you
and
so
I'm like,
much.
how the hell does someone... To me, sometimes there's separation for some people. What they post is not what you get when you see them in real life.
Yeah.
And for you, I feel like there's a consistency and an authenticity. Like, yes, Liv seems like a very detail-oriented person. She seems very calm. She's very confident in her skills because she's always posting about her work and what she's doing in classes. And then what I see you in real life and what I saw and what you produced in class in France, I'm like, yes, this all matches. There is no discrepancy.
I appreciate that so much. I think one of the things that is so difficult with social media is authenticity. And, I try to, stay true to those things in terms of posting what, represents me in the best light. So you recognizing that means so much. And I just want to thank you for having me on the podcast because I'm so excited, seeing where you've taken it and, designing logo for you in the beginning and hearing, where your vision was and seeing it come to light is so exciting. So I'm really honored to be here and to talk about, my journey with design with you. So thank you for having me today.
Yeah, that's so true. You did the logo,
Good.
which we're probably gonna have to talk about.
Yes,
Maybe, updating it this year. So
definitely. Yeah.
I'll connect with you on that. But yeah, it's you really did see from the beginning, and I didn't really know where it was gonna lead. It was just me dabbling a little bit with social media and going off of what friends were saying that I should try out. And that just took a turn because I didn't want to just be posting on my regular Instagram, and I wanted to take it a little bit further and push myself. And seeing people like you and people that we studied with in France,
Mhm.
everyone was extremely creative and passionate about what they did, really committed.
For sure. Yeah.
And I didn't necessarily have that avenue
Mhm.
until now. And being able to, I didn't know anything about editing an episode. I didn't know anything about producing. And I've probably don't in comparison to other people, but for me, it's been a growth in that sense. And just watching YouTube videos and learning
Mhm.
how to do certain things outside of my realm of comfort.
Mhm.
But that was definitely, I think, inspired from Jay, who's so into photography.
Still
Um,
one of my best friends to this day. Yes, we're
yeah.
like always in touch. She's so talented.
Yeah. Jackson, who's super into fashion. Um, so that for people listening is how Liv and I met. We did a fashion global studies program with Northeastern in Paris.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, that's how I first met her when she was a freshman.
It was such a
Um,
great, that crew of people that we met was so, inspiring. The amount of, passion that people had for fashion and design and photography and creating. I learned so much from
yeah,
just being around those people, not only being in class and working on those projects, but becoming friends with all of you. I think we all kind of took a piece of each other from that
yeah.
trip and, brought it into, our own creative process,
Mhm.
leaving Paris. But to this day, like Jackson is so still one of the coolest people I've ever met.
Yeah.
Jay is so passionate about what she does. And we're always in touch too. So that was a
Mhm.
really, a really, really great group of people.
Yeah, I remember being um very
Mhm.
nervous and overwhelmed because everyone's standards were so high.
Oh,
Like,
yeah, for sure.
know, um, in thinking back, I appreciate it more now.
Mhm.
Learning about how to be detailed oriented with your creativity and kind of honing it in to
Yes.
really master whatever you're trying to produce. That's the mentality that I try to take as much as possible when I'm, promoting something for the podcast on Instagram.
Yes.
um, when I'm thinking of content and people to interview, does it match with the brand of the podcast?
Mhm.
What can I do for season 2 that's different, and fixing the intro and all of that? Not that it's necessarily what we studied, but it's that mentality that was really helpful. Um, and from what I see in what you create, it seems like that's a discipline that you have in graphic design.
Yes.
um what did it always come natural to you, that discipline?
I would say, throughout my journey and kind of finding my own methods of creativity, I had always noticed, having an eye for things that were related to graphic design and kind of combining, my passions into something that was centralized around design. I didn't necessarily understand what design was growing up, but I was
Hmm.
always surrounded by it. So the discipline, behind design was kind of always around me in my environment. My mom was a self-taught artist and she worked as an interior designer. She worked as a photographer. So she kind of balanced all of these things that I was surrounded by growing up. And I think having someone that, put paintbrushes and colored markers in my hands at, age 2, it kind of started me off to understand that creativity. And I think creativity does come natural for some people. And I think when it does, it's definitely something that, is a gift. So I take it very, something that I treat as something so precious, because it's the way people think and the way people, function in the world. It's not everyone that thinks in this light of creativity, but when you do, it definitely allows you to see the world in such a different way. So always, I don't try to take it for granted. I try to really just cherish that skill set that was definitely really supported by people in my life growing up, and definitely really, really focused on throughout my college career. So definitely really figuring out like, oh, wow, this is how I've been thinking my whole life. And this is something that I can take into a career. Really having my professors kind of just help me to articulate my thoughts and understanding of who I was as a creative. So I would say it was always a part of me, but the support that I had growing up and the people around me definitely helped me to bring that to life and really focus on that as, my career in school.
Yeah, I remember you talking about the relationship with your mom when we were studying abroad. And I was like, that's really special. That's
Yeah,
really special that she did not neglect to teach you those things.
not at
It
all.
seems
Yeah.
like it transcended and you took what you wanted from that.
Mhm.
That's really
Like,
special.
completely. She is without a doubt my biggest inspiration. We always talk about opening up our own design studio together, because right now she works in speech therapy. But growing up, when I was growing up, she was always doing, these projects and painting in our house and always photographing me as a kid. She just would, I have her Pentax film camera now that she used to use when I was a kid, but it was just a life full of creativity and, us working on my projects together when I was younger and watching how detail oriented she was and taking from that, like even doing like science projects that we would, she was, she still amazes me to this day, the things that she does. But, as a single mom, she was kind of limited in, having to do a career as a speech therapist, but balancing, all the things that she wanted to do creatively. But she made sure that that was a part of my life. And when I went to Northeastern and, I was able to kind of almost develop from, her dreams as well, something she watched me do something that, I think the two of us were like, this is the most amazing thing that I could get out of my time at Northeastern, being in design classes and creating. And I always made sure that, she's the first person that I go to when I need an opinion on my work. And I don't, some of the projects that I have, her input is something that I value so, so much. And I think for her to watch me, go after my passions, because it was a different time back then when she was going to college, design and the arts was not looked at as something that could be an actual career or that you could make money from. So, her family was like speech therapy or, that's it. Or, going after a career where people would take you seriously or, that time period, it almost created a structure for kind of being stuck in that realm of, being stuck with, being a single mom and working on, just supporting me through what I was, going through growing up. But now where I am in this like space of freedom and just creating and doing, what I love so much, lighting a fire for her. And then the two of us are like, I'm graduating, like, let's do this. Let's after our passions and, be happy with what we do in our careers. And, potentially create a design team, a mother-daughter duo. And we're like, we'd be,
That's pretty
doing
badass.
pretty badass. We always talk about it. We're like, we'd be badass doing, some interior design,
Yeah.
photography, like
That's, you brought up a really good point that being able to study graphic design at Northeastern and take this into your future as a career, which wasn't an opportunity back then, that is a real reality.
oh yeah.
But and it's a misconception that you can't turn your creative passions into a business or a side hustle.
Yeah.
To be able for you to study graphic design and apply your creativity that way and turn it into a career, that's really inspiring. I remember mentoring little girls in at Northeastern. They were in Boston Public Schools around the area of Northeastern. And so many of them wanted to be graphic designers, or they were
Wow.
really into anime.
Yeah.
And I was like, you can hopefully study one day and take that into something, turn that into something. And
Possible.
it
Yeah.
is possible. However, it is really challenging or a scared um, thought to have for some
Mhm.
people because of that fear of not having the stability. But now we're seeing the rise of social media. We're seeing
Yes.
the rise of storytelling and branding in social media. And now this has become a multi-billion-dollar industry,
Mhm.
graphic design, because you're able to share who you are through these visual assets.
Yes. I think, going off of that, the society that we live in is one that, like you were saying, thinks about stability and thinks about what's a legitimate field of work that can support your goals and, basically just having money to survive is
Yeah.
kind of,
Yeah.
what we really focus on. But in that is really thinking about, what makes you happy
Hmm.
and, thinking about the things that inspire you and the things that motivate you. And,
Yeah.
um, I think society kind of is so, I mean, it is a negative place
Yeah.
sometimes where there's half of people that are saying, follow your dreams. And then there's half of people that are like, I don't really know if that's a good idea.
Yeah.
I don't really know if you're going to be able to make money that way. And I think if we just all supported one another, as cheesy as that sounds, and just, said, go after what you want and just keep going after what you
Yeah.
want,
It'll come to you.
it will come to you. And, I think being in these design classes and being surrounded by people who, because it's hard, I started off as an architecture major.
Really?
Yes. So that is a little bit about me. I was, very, very focused on architecture. I studied it in high school. I was very set, completely set on being an architecture student, becoming an architect. Everyone in my high school knew like that's what her passion is. I took all the classes that were available. My high school had a lot of opportunity
Yeah.
growing up to, take advantage of things that maybe you'd want to study in college.
Yeah, that's huge.
So I, really took advantage of those things. And when I got to Northeastern, something inside of me was like, this is not where I'm supposed to be. And it was
Mhm.
complete shock, like complete panic. I went to one of my classes and it was a math class and I was like, no, 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 no. I was like, this is not what I'm meant to be doing. And I really didn't know. I was like, oh my God, I have a day to figure this out because the architecture program at Northeastern is very,
Yeah.
very rigorous and you spend time in studio from 8 a.m. until 2 a.m. Like
Yeah.
you just, that is your life when you're at Northeastern. I knew I wanted to join clubs. I knew I wanted to do photography, fashion. And a lot of people that I had talked to were like, this is going to be a big commitment.
Mhm.
And it wasn't the commitment that scared me. It was not having the opportunity to explore other things and kind of grow into who I wanted to be as a creative. So I got onto that website after that math class. I looked for like, do I want to do photography as my major? Do I want to do, design as my major? And I knew nothing about graphic design.
Wow.
In terms of the technical, like what I would experience through courses. I just knew that there was something that intrigued me about it. And I just kind of went for it. My advisor was like, you need to pick now, or you're going to be in this architecture class, these classes for the semester. And I just said graphic design. That's it. I'm changing my major. And that is, for me, there was a lot of, just kind of relating it back to that fear of stability. I think a lot of, a big part of me in picking architecture at that time was thinking I love design, but what's a field that's going to provide, money, or is going to be something where, I can actually create a career, or there's going to be jobs, or so I was like, okay, architecture, but in my heart, that wasn't something that I wanted for myself. I was doing that for the people around me, kind of working on myself, selecting something because society was just like, you're not going to make money, or you're not going to be happy, or, all these things that I was listening to so many other people. And in deciding to do graphic design, I was listening to me.
Yes.
And you know what? I'm going to do this. These are my 5 years at school. And no matter what comes out of it and where I go, I'm staying true to who I am. And I'm not going to medical school because someone said, that's where the money is, or I'm not, and it's just doing what makes you happy. If you want to go to medical school, if you want to be a lawyer, if you want to be an artist, it's like going after and listening to your heart is the most important part.
You listened to your intuition, which is so hard to do. And as we grow older, you get confused between your intuition and your overthinking mind.
Oh yeah, it was rough. It was a rough period of time. I mean, 2 days. I literally had 2 days to pick my major. But I was like, what, am I trusting myself? Am I making the biggest mistake of my time at Northeastern? I don't know. Fast forward to where I am now, it was the best decision I ever made.
Yeah.
And that just goes to show you that sometimes the scary ideas and the scary thoughts end up being the best ones for you.
Yeah, you have to confront them, right? You have to confront what your intuition is saying, what your gut is saying. Exactly. And some people might think it's silly, like, oh, it's just a major. Well, it's a big investment, and
especially at Northeastern.
Especially at Northeastern. And you want to make sure that whatever you're investing your time or energy into, whether it's 6 months or 5 years, that you're going to enjoy that process. Yes, there's going to be challenges and stressful times, but at the end of the day, you're enjoying it by saying, this was what I chose to do. And that's always going to be coming up in life. Like when you graduate, there's going to be another set of decisions that you're going to have to make. Tell me about what it was like jumping into those classes, not really knowing the technical skills that came with it. What was it like?
It was terrifying. My first class that I had, I wandered and, I selected my new schedule and I just wandered into this 3D design class that was like, it was last minute. So it was basically what was available that I could get into. And at Northeastern, the structure of courses for design, you take 2D, 3D, 4D, 5D. That's like the basics of fundamentals. It kind of touches upon, 2D is painting and, 2D design, drawing, all that kind of stuff. 3D is working in the wood shop. And that's where I started. So
oh my gosh.
I went into that class. He assigned the material and he was like, all right, go to Home Depot, get, this giant slab of wood, and you're going to design a table or whatever you choose to design. So
oh my gosh.
I chose create a table, and it was just full force kind of jumping into the studio environment that I had never been in. But it, it sounds cheesy to say, it was entirely where I belonged. So it was almost like, how I describe it, and I always say this, is that design was always a part of me. I just
Mhm.
never knew the word for it. I never knew that, the reason that I loved architecture was because I loved design. I
Mhm.
didn't necessarily want to be doing the math and the engineering, but photographing it, admiring it, looking at those sketches, those are the designs.
Yeah.
The reason I loved magazines and books and print was because I loved design. The reason I loved fashion was because I loved design. So it was like this moment where I realized that design was the word that I was looking for my entire life. And it was this weird thing where, I get chills thinking about it, where it kind of became, it like went full circle, where I just
Mhm.
ended up in these classes, and in this weird way, it happened the way it was supposed to.
Yeah.
Figuring
Yep.
out, going through this panic of like, I can't do architecture. This is not what I want for myself. And then ending up in these design courses where I the word, like the term of graphic design, and taking these classes was something that, I knew that I loved print. Like I mentioned, I knew that I loved words and type, and growing up again, being surrounded by books that my mom collected, like everything that
Right.
I was surrounded by ended up kind of surrounding me in,
Mhm.
in these courses. And um, taking these classes and realizing that graphic design was the term for one of the things I loved most, which was books and type and all these things. It was a real like big awakening moment for me in my creative journey. And again, I really didn't know a lot about, I took art classes in high school. I was in like an advanced sculpting class. So I was always dabbling in different things creatively, but
Mhm.
college design courses are a whole other level. I mean,
Yeah.
college courses in general, it was a huge, even taking writing and business and all these things, it was a big adjustment to, understand the level of work that was, required of you,
Yeah.
time and all of that. But I went through that 3D class, and that was a huge, I developed a really great relationship with my professor, and he became kind of a mentor through that time. And I spent endless hours in that wood shop. I was there from 5 p.m. until midnight working on this table. I was had goggles on. I was just in a place where I was working with my hands, and I loved that. And I just knew that what was going to come after that was going to be a really exciting, scary
Mhm.
time where I was challenged. And um, the following years, I met professors that I talk to this day, that I have
Mhm.
developed such great relationships with, that have mentored me through my time at Northeastern. The art and design community is super tiny at Northeastern, so you kind
Yeah.
of know everyone, all the professors, first name basis. It's the courses were, studio courses are 3.5 hours, so that was
Really?
an adjustment, kind of staying in that one place for 3.5 hours and working and going through critique. Critique was a huge adjustment to get used to,
Yeah.
getting up and just confidently saying, this is what I created and this is why. And then waiting for their responses. Do I like
Mhm.
it? Do they hate it? What's going to happen with that? Um, but when I dove into the graphics courses that were based on type, and
Mhm.
that was like the biggest growth period for me at Northeastern, because I knew I loved it, but I had never opened a computer and created something through InDesign or Adobe Illustrator or Photoshop. And my professor, Daryl Smith, who has been my mentor since sophomore year, since I met him, I had him for 4 classes. We developed a really great relationship together, and he's the editor and creative lead at Recon magazine. So
Okay.
that's where I
That's
work
how you
for an
yeah.
internship. But that course I mean, we laugh about it. We literally to this day laugh about it. He's like, "Do you remember your first assignment?" And I was like, "That was the ugliest thing I ever created in my life." Like, it was just so, it was such a learning curve. We like
Mm-hmm.
talked, design a recipe for an apple tart, and it was more so about like the layout of how you would place the type in terms of hierarchy and how you would design like menu design. So it was a really, it was a basic assignment, but it was really to kind of understand the basics of type. And
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know a lot about type, so it was pretty bad, like looking back at it. But it was,
Mm-hmm.
it was such a element of growth, and I still have it on my computer. And I look at it and I'm like, wow, you came a long way, came a long.
Yeah.
And from that assignment until our final assignment, we had to design. It was called the systems project, and we were assigned to do 12 different cards. I think they were 5 by 5 cards, or I think they were 8 by 8 actually. He gave us text that was, we had to design a card for each discipline in CAMD. So it was like
Okay.
photography, graphic design, sculpting, whatever text he gave us, we had to design the systems, and the typography had to work together. The aesthetics had to work together, the photographs that you chose. So
Mm.
I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what's going to happen here, but it clicked. Like, it clicked for me. And Daryl and I always talk about it to this day. Like, that was where my journey in graphic design started. Like, that was where I was like, I see it, I get it, I understand the type, the layout, the photos, all of that being and working together. That is where it started. So that's just a little bit about my
Yeah.
my courses and
Yeah. It's
that.
fascinating. Like what you started talking off about was the fact that you didn't have the language to communicate exactly what you wanted to do or what interested you. You you knew the parts of architecture that interested you, but not really how to take that or bring that into fruition until you really started those design courses and learned the terminology. And I think that happens a lot. It's very common. And you also have to not just take the experiences that you've been learning in your college education, but or your internship experiment experiences, but you remember that you like to do in your childhood,
Yeah,
like you said. And I think bridging those together could give you the opportunity of feeling like you haven't lost those dreams. They've just evolved and you've learned the technical grown up experience behind
exactly.
it.
That's such a beautiful way to put it. Like, it was a part of me all along, just really finding
Yeah.
the words to um describe that. And it's scary for sure, just like thinking about, you know where I was in terms of, I'm a very like, I need to know what's going to happen, I need to have the structure, the plan.
Mhm.
That was a very like, we're going to go with the flow kind of
Yeah.
time in my life. Like, we're going to figure this out and see what happens. And it was
Those are
big.
the best times.
Mhm.
I think I've made the best decisions for my life when I've just let go of the plan that I had. And I'm a very type A person. Um, but as soon as I accepted that any higher power or the universe laughs when you make plans, and accepted that this is an opportunity again to listen to my intuition, look at my surroundings, absorb what I can, and then figure things out. Things have worked in my favor because I just let go and let be.
Yes, I live by that now. Like, in going through that growth period and being like this, that was a huge learning lesson of letting things go and just putting it into the universe's hands, or, whoever, whatever higher power you believe in. Like, I live by that now. And I think, going through like the co-op process and this,
Mhm.
high stress of job searches and all these things, I always tell myself the path that I'm meant to be on, it's going to
It'll
take,
come.
and
Yeah.
it'll got me here, so
Yeah.
definitely letting go and just enjoying life in the process and just allowing what's meant to happen or come to you, come to you.
Mhm. And another thing that you mentioned was, you know, you said that that architecture students stay in their studios until 2 a.m., but then you ended up doing the same thing. And I find that funny, but the difference is that you had a passion that it didn't matter what time it wasn't a sacrifice. It was just lending itself to your growth and something that really interested you. When when I sit down and I'm editing an episode, yes, at first I'm like, "Oh my god, how is this gonna turn out?" But then when I'm in it, I'm in it.
Yeah,
Or when I'm thinking of content for Thriving Thursdays, I'm like, "Okay," I'm dreading it, but then when I'm speaking or writing, it
mhm.
just I the time passes.
It doesn't feel like work.
It doesn't.
Mhm.
It's in a side note too, like, we've been talking about taking your passions and turning it into your career, and unfortunately, that's not the reality for some people. However, that doesn't mean you have to completely lose it. You can totally turn it into your side hustle, and so many entrepreneurs and business people have turned their side hustles into their main business, and sometimes that leads to more success than if they stayed in their 9 to 5.
Yeah,
But there's, like we said, there's different times in your life and you just have to go with the flow. That doesn't mean you have to lose your interests and passions.
exactly.
Um,
Exactly. There have been nights where I've been up until, 2 in the morning working on projects. I've definitely since the pandemic have worked on, you know, setting some boundaries for myself.
good, good.
I think starting off as a freshman and gaining that trust in myself as well. So once I kind of reached the point, like I would say about the end of my third year, going into my fourth year, where you're like, okay, you're in classes with freshmen, you're in classes with, your
Mhm.
fourth year, fifth year, and there's a range of ages and people with, different skill sets. So you kind of start to realize like, okay, I'm kind of the person that I can, help other people in the classes
Yeah.
or, I've taken so many courses and just kind of learning to trust yourself, which was a big
Yes.
part of my growth period and being like, okay, I can close the computer, it's where it is. And
Yes.
versus when I was a sophomore or freshman, I was terrified of like not understanding what the grading process was and is this exactly how it is supposed to be. It was all new.
Mhm.
Once I understood how professors and the design uh, courses, how they graded and how they looked at projects, it was really just learning to trust myself and being like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm gonna set some boundaries and close that computer and go to bed early.
Absolutely. Because that's fueling yourself.
Exactly.
Because by giving yourself that time back, you're just going to come more energized or with more of an open mind or a different perspective to get back into that design that you're working on or project. I'm a firm believer whenever I hear interviews of like very successful people saying you can't get success unless you've, gone to bed at like 3 in the morning every day. I'm like, to each their own. If that's how you got there, great. There might be some days where I go to bed later than others.
Mhm.
But if I see that I'm just not producing anything fruitful and that I'm just getting burnt out, I'm going to stop.
Mhm.
There's going to be another 8 hours in the day, and honestly, I my partner and I are always talking about working smarter, not necessarily always working harder to the bone, because work is always going to be there.
Mhm.
And
I think it's a beautiful thing to watch people just prioritize self-care. And I think throughout the pandemic, that kind of became a discussion, just
yes.
hearing the word self-care, and it's real. It's a real thing, and
Yeah.
taking care of your mental state, you know, it should come first in a lot of different areas. And um for me personally, just kind of realizing throughout the pandemic that, when that period stopped, and it was like I think it was my junior year. It was my third year when the pandemic hit. So that was my craziest semester that I can recall of
Yeah.
work, where I was just like just exhausted. Like I was
Mhm.
up at 7 a.m. for my courses, in bed at 3 a.m. from, the amount that I was juggling and balancing throughout my time. And when it stopped, I was on co-op, but I still was exhausted getting up and commuting. And it always hit me that, feeling just the world stopped, just
Mhm.
feeling that, running around and everything stopping and being like, what are
Mhm.
we doing? What are we doing to ourselves? Like we are just sprinting from point A to point B, and
Yeah.
not even thinking about, how to take care of us and how to take care, we can't really provide or, complete these assignments or complete what's expected of us if we're running on fumes. And I
Yeah.
think it's a big awakening for me, where I noticed it wasn't just me. I was like,
Yeah.
so many people being like, I really felt that pause, that like
Mhm.
stop in what we were doing as a society, and just running around and being like, hold on.
Switching gears a little
Mhm.
bit, can you talk a little bit about your co-op experiences, which I always like to talk about on the podcast because a lot of people don't really know what co-ops are. I've had a few Northeastern people come and talk. But co-ops are 6 month long, depending. Some people might extend them. Um, Internships, but I hate calling them internships because I feel like
More than, yeah.
it's more than that. I think it waters it down. Um, Tell us what it was like working in graphic design. I think the co-op program is especially beneficial for people who study the skills that you've learned, and similar to like engineering and those kinds of skills, being that in the work environment and seeing how they transpire and what it actually is like, and going under the direction of a company that has certain brand guidelines and expectations. What is that like?
Yeah, so my first co-op was with TJX. So I worked for Home Goods and Home Sense as a graphic designer. During that process of applying to, co-ops and kind of figuring out what I wanted to do, it was definitely a rough time. It's very competitive, I would say, at Northeastern, which I think a lot of people, it's such an amazing opportunity. But when you're in it and you're, applying, and you're in these classes, and the person next to you may have gotten the job that you just applied for, it's definitely something to get used to, and
Yeah.
something, um, again, another learning process of just kind of trying to figure out how to keep that tunnel vision and focus on you, your goals, and where you're going.
Mhm.
Hard when there's a lot of pressure on getting a co-op and what co-op it is and all of those things. But I was fortunate enough to have that opportunity to work with TJX. And as soon as I went into the interview, I mean, I love Home Goods and Home Sense. That's another thing that my mom and I do all the time. We're always in Home Goods,
Yeah.
shopping, and getting inspiration for interior spaces and all those things. I was there shopping for my dorm from freshman year until now.
Which is gorgeous, by the way. If people go on her Instagram, which I'll put it in the episode notes, it's like, are you freaking kidding me? Like,
So much. I always treat that period of moving in as like a hobby moment, where
yeah.
I'm like, this is, it's fun for me.
Yeah.
It's a really enjoyable time. But yeah, so being able to work with a company that I, was like, I love furniture and
Yeah.
decorations and decor, all that stuff. I was really, really excited about it. And they hired me, and I started the co-op in January of 2020. So
Okay.
obviously not knowing 2.5
Right.
months later I'd be getting sent home. But from what I experienced, it was, a big, big, big learning curve. Coming out from an environment where, and I'm going to be very honest about my
Yeah.
experience. I know a lot of people, I'm definitely going to be honest and, explaining my journey through that time. But it was hard to come from creative freedom and complete creative freedom and doing exactly, what I wanted to do. I had a prompt from my professors and creating exactly what I wanted to create. Of course, the support of, my classmates kind of guiding through critique and my professors guiding through critique. But going into an environment where, you have that brand guideline, you have the typefaces that you can use, the colors you can use, the ways that you can use them. It was a moment where I was like, what's happening here? I was
Yeah.
like, I knew that that's where graphic design was, but in certain places, I think, again, it was a moment where I was like working for a corporation. That's where, the money is. That's where I can have a stable career. So, sitting down and working in a cubicle versus a studio,
Yeah.
for sitting. I mean, sitting all day. I developed back problems from just
Yeah.
sitting at my computer, doing my work. And, you know, that was something that I think definitely like I struggled with, feeling the lack of creativity in these corporate environments. I was super fortunate though to have a really great boss that, she was the person that was assigned to me to kind of help me through that process. I learned a lot from her, and there were so many things though that I did enjoy with it. I got to go to photo shoots to, see what they were doing in terms of creating, advertisements, and I got
Mhm.
posters that were actually in store. I think
Really?
it was last summer where it was so weird because I kind of completely just removed that part. Kind of, I was like, all right, my
Yeah.
girlfriend, whatever. And then I walk into a store, I mean, yeah, last summer, and they had the posters that I like, the advertising.
Wow.
Whoa, it was so crazy to see my work in store. So there was a lot that I learned, a lot that I got to take with me afterwards. And I think one of the biggest things that I learned was knowing that the corporate, industry and environment was not for me as a
Yeah.
creative. And to be honest, co-op is not just about falling in love with what you do. It's about
Yes.
learning as well. What do I like and what do I not like? What environment is best for me and what isn't good for me? So
Mhm.
in that setting, I kind of learned, yes, is this really awesome to be doing, working for a big corporation and working with a creative director and all of these things. And I had a very small team, which was great. So it's a very, personable kind of situation. But I learned in that time that it definitely was not where I saw myself.
All of what co-op is
Yeah.
about, like learning what you don't
Mhm.
want to do. I think it's rare, to be honest, for you to have this amazing co-op and say, this is exactly what I want to do. This is it. To me,
I
it's more interesting and it provides more growth for you to have an opportunity of saying, this is not what I want to do. Um, because then you might put yourself in a different situation, a new opportunity and experience. And that could be better or worse. You don't know. But to have that advantage at the age where we, do co-ops
Mhm.
in school, think about all of the people who graduate and have those experiences after graduating. I think you have the leg up now to say, I'm not going to apply to a similar job like I had in co-op and try something new." And you're kind of 3 steps
Mhm.
ahead. even though it might seem very annoying or frustrating. Um, I think that's just the beauty of co-op. I had two very different ones. I worked in insurance, in marketing events,
Mhm.
and I loved the people that I worked with in my team, all women,
Mhm.
and I hated the environment.
Yeah.
Like it
Mhm.
was just all suits, insurance, like it's just a-
Yeah.
not my cup of tea.
Mhm.
And then I went into health communications at an agency where I learned the wording and the communication behind what I wanted to do or what I liked, the skills itself. But I didn't necessarily like the clients that I was
Mhm.
working with all of the time. And then that led me to working in reproductive rights and communicating for that kind of an organization that makes an impact in the community.
Mhm. Yeah, I think, that outlook is so, so, so important. And it took me a second to get there. With everything happening with the pandemic, I was like, this sucks. Everything sucks. I was just in such
Yeah.
a negative place. But, going off of what you were saying, like, really figuring out that those opportunities, good and bad, are opportunities to learn and understand what's best for you and what works, what doesn't. And like you were saying, thinking about it in a way of, applying for jobs and figuring that out, at 25 versus at 21, that, this corporate environment wasn't for me. Because I guarantee if I didn't have, working at TJX, I would probably be applying to larger corporations or,
Yeah.
places that in my mind were the right fit for me. Um, so, definitely
Yeah.
all of that.
And how was that process of going into that setting or even working for the firm or the magazine that your professor leads?
Mhm.
Um, did you ever feel like you were being challenged in a good way, or was there a grappling of confidence with your skills? I think those are really tied, especially with this industry of graphic design.
Yeah, I definitely think that specifically with Recon, the magazine that my professor developed, that was a big opportunity for me to, one, it was kind of well, it was the complete opposite of TJX. It was a startup. It was just me and him. He had created the magazine with his brother, and he had interns, but the pandemic hit, so everyone was kind of focusing on themselves, leaving internships, and it was kind of, you know, it wasn't these interns had left, and I had reached out to him, and I thought to myself, like, I I was applying for co-ops during a time where companies were just reaching back, messaging me back and saying, sorry, we can't hire anyone. We don't have the funds because of COVID. We don't really know what's going on right now. We don't know how to go out remote with this. Like, so many issues that were arising, but Recon was kind of the light in the darkness for me, because
Mhm.
it was an opportunity to work with a complete opposite area of design, which, one, it was editorial, which I absolutely adore.
Mhm.
And it was a startup. So it was very, very just like an intimate opportunity to just kind of work with one person, my mentor. And the messaging of the magazine itself had really connected to who I was as a designer and a creative. The magazine is about reconnecting with humanity, um,
Yeah.
finding ways to make the world a little bit brighter. So it basically is compiled of different stories of people who have um, done something that's touched another person's life, or vice versa, whether it's planting flowers outside of, someone's, or your own apartment, or, gardening, or, different stories about helping the homeless, or, things that are kind of ways that we can build our communities and
Mm.
make the world, a little bit brighter through these dark times. So for me, being a part of something that had impacted, um, who I was as a creative, but also the messaging behind it, I think really just created an opportunity that I was very, very grateful for. And working with Rekin specifically, and Daryl, it was just an opportunity that, I grew as an individual in terms of, branding, and an individual creative, like working in a
Yeah.
place where, maybe this is somewhere that I would want to kind of branch off into the future, doing
Mm.
branding or doing, editorial work, and in a more intimate space where I'm kind of working with, one-on-one with people. And I did, the social media, I did photography, I did branding, spread design, writing. It was like touching upon everything.
Everything.
So it was a really great, um,
You were dabbling into everything, and you
yeah,
finally figured out maybe a little bit, an extra puzzle piece to the story of adding to your toolbox, I like to say.
I say the same thing.
Yeah,
Like each class, I'm like adding to my tool belt of like little things that I'm learning. I always say that.
yeah. And what was it like, then taking that and working with the Avenue?
Yeah, so the Avenue is like my baby. I always,
Yeah,
I'm sure all of us who are in, lead roles at the Avenue feel the same way. I work as the design director alongside the creative team. So I work with the creative director, photo director, associate design director. So she's like my right hand throughout
yeah.
the process of creating. I lead a team of designers, about 7 designers, through developing the pages and style of the magazine.
Mhm.
I started off as a designer my 3rd year, and I just worked my way up to becoming design director. I absolutely adored it from the very beginning. I always say I wished I joined as a freshman, but it was just the timing that was right for me at the time, really kind of getting
Mhm.
comfortable being, on campus and being a student, and then saying to myself, yeah, I'm ready to kind of expand my commitment.
Right.
And being a designer for the Avenue magazine was really one of the first steps in growing as an editorial designer. And again, it was an opportunity to combine everything that I loved. So
Mhm.
it was fashion, photography, type, layout design, and books and magazines. So it was like the perfect mix of everything. And that was really where I did some editorial, like a magazine design in one of my classes, but this was like a real, it wasn't just a mock
Mhm.
up or just saying this is what the magazine would look like. It was a real printed issue.
Right.
And starting off with that, it really, seeing my work as a junior printed in something was so, I designed 2 spreads. It was really small, and
Mhm.
but opening that magazine, being like I was a part of this, was so exciting and motivating, and I absolutely loved it. And so I moved up to associate design director, and eventually started off as the design director. So working, as that position has been such a great, incredible learning process. You asked me about the layout
Yeah. How,
process. Yeah. So explaining a little bit about the design process with leading the team. So when I took over, I was again working with Recon, and it was, you know I was working as an editorial designer, but also taking over as a design director. And there was a lot of like, oh my goodness, there's so much, that I'm learning right now. So trusting myself, trusting my ability to lead this design team. I had such great support with the rest of the creative team, and working with the avenue and leading these designers, and developing these spreads that were based on this concept. So every magazine is focused on a single word. So the magazines that I worked on with as a design director were Awakening. I think the next one it was Disrupt, Awakening. I don't know why I can't remember the past few ones, but our recent one is Velocity. And kind of tying those into what we're experiencing as people and individuals, big community-based aspect, tying in that, those concepts of fashion, photography, everything, to make it what it is. And designing those spreads, my role is to kind of lead the design team into what the vision is as, the avenue. What is our vision on the creative team side? And applying that to the sessions that I have with the designers, and leading the critiques, and kind of helping to kind of navigate them towards what we're looking for on the creative side. It's been such a rewarding opportunity for me to kind of finish my time out at Northeastern, to lead and support. And I always go into those meetings telling people and designers that, I'm here to help, because when I started off, the people who were design directors and leads they helped me grow into where I was. I'm here at your discretion to help you in whatever way you need, in terms of creative support, feedback, all of those things. I'm a message away. You just type what you need, what you need me to look at, or that was kind of the mindset that I had going into it. Really just kind of wanting to support people in their creative growth and their creative process.
It sounds like it really is a collective spirit and environment. And I think you touched upon a really important topic that we talked about recently in a lot of different episodes about mentorship and the power that has, and how you've obviously and clearly have had great mentors who you've worked with, and to see the evolution and in your journey from starting at Northeastern and not being sure as to how things were going to work out with graphic design, but having those mentors that kind of held you accountable and supported you. And now you have morphed into one yourself. And I think that's an important part of becoming a leader and just a good human being. It's very easy to not share the wealth of knowledge that you might learn, and you just keep it to yourself, thinking that that's what's going to get you to high places. But if you don't share that knowledge, if you don't support other people, how do you expect for the universe to, in return, keep giving you good things and keep giving you and providing you with new mentors and opportunities in the future? And for every good connection that you make with a person, the better the outcome, that's the next opportunity that you might have, because they might come back in your life, and then seeing that, I think, is a great trajectory. Well, we're gonna end with our last question. And so the concept behind the podcast, because you helped in the design of the logo, and I had specifically requested if you could include a rose in there, because that to me is a symbol of there's the beauty behind the pain sometimes, that a rose is a beautiful flower, and it's dainty, but there's some dangerous parts to it if you don't handle it correctly. And I think the purpose behind asking what people's rose and thorns are at the end of an episode is to kind of recap their journey, and sometimes you find that the thorn feeds into the rose, and you kind of have that, you're emboldened with that confidence to continue on and knowing that you can overcome whatever challenge that might come your way in the next chapter of your journey with graphic design. So, what has been your rose and thorn thus far?
So I would say, I mean, I love that analogy because thinking about, the bottom part of the rose, which is like you know, the jagged, part that has the thorns and, it develops into that beautiful thing, like you were saying. And my thorn, I think, looking back and thinking about, the lack of trust that I had in myself, as I was mentioning during, those beginning parts of my design career, and, really just kind of a lot of worry and perfectionism and, panic about, is this the right way to be doing things? Is this, the correct method of design? Is this good? Is this bad? A lot of just really centralized around a lack of trust in who I was as a creator. And through that process came the trust. Like through that process of learning came the rose, which was, where I am now working as a design director. And then looking back and thinking about who I was as a freshman, like it almost brings tears to my eyes thinking about the journey that I went on to get to where I am now. And I was talking about it with my mom when I came back to Northeastern. I was super emotional, like coming back from my last semester and just saying like, wow, like coming, to campus as an anxious, stressed, nervous freshman and then leaving in the place that I am right now is like, I could have never imagined, I just remember being like, I can't wait to go home. Like college isn't for me, all these things, like, am I transferring? Is this place for me? Just a lot of doubt in where I was supposed to be. And it ended up becoming the most beautiful journey that I could have ever asked for. Like I truly am so blessed to have been able to combine all of my passions, to study abroad in Paris, to, add 3 minors, which sounds absolutely insane, but, I was so focused on developing my, my perfect degree, the degree that I don't want to say perfect, but the degree that I was so excited about. As a freshman, did I ever think that would happen? Absolutely not. So through that journey of, that being my thorn of self-doubt and worry and panic and, just wondering where I would end up, but, trusting along the way, later on that, this is what I was supposed to be doing and where I'm supposed to be, and having it be, a beautiful ending as a senior now. So it's been really great.
I'm smiling ear to ear because I remember that last semester for me and how emotional it was. But I think that's a good thing because that shows that you're really mindful from, thinking from where you came from, and how you started to now. Not everyone has that gift of mindfulness, and that feeds into building your confidence because you're not just saying, okay, check, I have my bachelor's in this degree. It's something of value to you that you really invested in, not just financially, but you invested your energy and your passions into it. And you came out with something that you didn't expect, which is beautiful because now you have had so much more experience than what you initially carved out for yourself. And I think that's extremely important as you enter whatever journey you're going into now to say that you're enjoying this last semester and really living in it.
Thank you. I appreciate it, so much, being able to, be a part of this podcast and every opportunity that I, can get to talk with, especially like another female about, our journeys through life and how crazy it can be. I'm very grateful to have had the opportunity to do this.
Thank you. Thank you first for doing it for me and for working on that first design for the podcast.
Sure.
And like I said, we'll definitely be seeing more of your work, at least on this end.
Yes.
And yeah, make sure to check out Liv's handle. That'll be in the episode notes. And is there anywhere else that they can find your work, or where
Yes.
they can find the Avenues work as well?
Yes. So we have an Instagram page, the Avenue Mag, and my Instagram also links to, I have all my information about the Avenue on there. My portfolio website is livethroughdesign.com. I believe I have it in my Instagram bio too. So that just has my portfolio and projects that I've worked on throughout my time at Northeastern.
Great. Check her out. And thank you for tuning into today's episode and keep being unexpectedly bold. Thanks for listening to another episode of Dangerously Dainty, the podcast. Don't miss out on new episodes by turning on notifications for any new releases. And while you're at it, I would love to see you supporting the show by leaving a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Last but not least, you can also follow the Dangerously Dainty Instagram at dangerously.dainty. Thanks for listening and keeping unexpectedly bold.